Hi, so no comic review episodes this week. It's going to be a really big one next week because I've got like 2.5 weeks worth of comics to get next time. I'm going to go on next Thursday because I only got half the week before. I've not picked any of this up this week and I've got next week to get, so it's going to be a nightmare and it'll be a really long video. But today I'm going to get, I know I did an overview of this, but this is my review because I've finished it now of 2000 AD. No, definitive edition of Slaine, Volume 1. So this covers it's in chronological order. It covers the first story arcs of Slaine. So Slaine first appeared in 1983, 20th of August, created by Pat Mills and his then wife, Angie Mills, who's now Angie Kincaid. She only did one episode. She did the first episode. And then after that, the art duties on the first block of story arcs was shared between um, Bellardinelli, Massimo Bellardinelli, and Mick Mann. And very radical different styles. And back in the day, I didn't realise why. So I've had kind of like an epiphany. Sounds like I'm having a stroke. Never mind anything else. I had an epiphany when I was reading this, and it registered why they did it like this. One, to give the artists breaks so they could get it out frequently, because obviously 2000 AD, unlike American comics, is a weekly, and the strips normally average between 5 to 6 pages in length. So Angie Kincaid basically did the first chapter, which was just like a throwaway chapter. It's like what they did with Nemesis, where it's basically just to introduce the character. The art by Angie Kincaid is very much like the Dungeons and Dragons uh, artist of the time back in the early 80s. So it's a bit amateurish, very heavy on the inks, not appealing whatsoever. I think if she'd have stayed on as the artist, Slaine would not be what it is today, this institution in 2000 AD. But she did do a gorgeous map of the lands of Slaine's time. So Slaine is like a punk rock version of Conan, but steeped in Celtic mythology as well, which makes it very interesting. Pat Mills loves his history, whether it's First World War with Charlie's War or whether it's Celtic mythology like here. So it kind of brings a. There's still fantastical elements, but it's like Game of Thrones, where the fantastical elements are much more muted than you get in, say, Dungeons and Dragons or Conan. Um, because he roots in our Earth, in our centuries ago, but it's still our earthly timeline. So Bellardinelli was one who really kicked it off with this first story arc, which basically sets up the characterization between Slaine and Ukko, his loyal, in brackets, dwarf servant. So the warriors of Slaine's time, the Celts, they had certain warriors who were prized above all other warriors. They're called the Warped, and they have, once they're meant to be in tune with the Earth Goddess, and once they get sufficiently enraged, they have a warp spasm. And Slaine is one of these characters, and they wear what they call warp belts or warp harnesses to basically stop them ripping the clothes and just to basically keep them in control even when they're having the warp spasm. So when they have the warp spasm, they really do warp. Not like the Hulk, where it's just like going big and green. The body completely gets contorted. There's a steam of blood, jets of blood coming out of the head, and things like that. Very, very gruesome. And I realise now. So Bellardinelli sets up the scene, introduces Slaine and Ukko. It's very much like an everyman sword and sorcery kind of tale, where they travel from town to town, and they come into conflicts with different factions, different warriors, and they're just trying to earn a living, basically. Ukko is money mad, he's wealth mad. Slaine just wants adventure, he just wants to meet nice ladies, he just wants to have his belly full with beer and good food. So they're coming at it from completely different aspects. So Blood and sets the scene really well. he's a very classic 2000 AD artist. He reintroduced Dan Dare when 2000 AD first launched, and he did Ace Trucking Co. as well. He's got a very unique, weird kind of style, and it fits for getting like the tone set for Slaine, for how he warps spasms, and just gives it that nice little weird touch. But then Mick Mann comes on, and he obviously rose to prominence with doing Judge Dredd. He had a very almost like blocky, jagged style, and he kind of elevates that style for Slaine. And I really did not like his style when he first started on Slaine because it was such a departure from what he did with Judge Dredd. I was expecting his style to be like Judge Dredd, and it kind of threw me for a six because it's kind of like very etchy, very scratchy. But now, since then, obviously, I've grown up because when Slaine came out, I was 13, 14. But now, reading that with much more mature eyes, I could see what a genius he was and how it fits to the flavour of the time, what Slaine's meant to be set in. And it's just drop dead gorgeous. And I was just going to say what Mick Mann brings to it. He brings a gravitas to the story. He gets it rooted. He features more about the landscape, the surroundings, and the tribes, and the warfare as well, the conflicts. He's very good at drawing conflict. He does a good warp spasm as well. But I realised what happened was Pat Mills. What I like about this, I'm going all over tangents, but what I like about this and what I like about a lot of 2000 AD comics or series in 2000 AD, no matter how long the strips go on for, majority of the time, apart from Judge Dredd, because he's such a beast, the behemoth, that they've got like about a team of about 6 rotating writers for that. But other strips, they keep the same writer. So Slaine has always been written by Pat Mills. So from 1983 through to present day, it's always been Pat Mills. So unlike American comics, where if you've got IP and intellectual property, say for example Batman, Superman, thousands of different people have written it, but it's one voice for Slaine, and that helps because he can do what he wants with the character. It's his baby, it's his character. And so you see Slaine starting out originally as a 19-year-old with Ukko, and through the pages, even though these are like just the first adventures, you see him growing and encountering more of. As you see him growing, we grow with him. We see him encountering like the druids, who basically smell of shit. They're revered, and they call the smell, the stench that they have, they call it an aspect of their holiness, that they're in tune with the god, with the goddess or whatever. And they have these straws to speak out of and kind of like breathe out of, because they literally they never wash, they never bathe, and they're covered like in all this matting and straw, and they're just horrible. Let's see if I can find one. It's always the case, isn't it? When you don't need to find something, you can find it straight away, if that makes sense. There we go. So these are the druids. There's different ones. The slow feg. This one's slow. I forgot what it's called. But so basically, what happens is Slaine encounters goes into different towns. He encounters different people. He encounters these druidesses who serve the druids and are basically willing to be sacrificed. And he kind of runs away with one. But then he ends up working for this druid who's fighting against Slowfed. Just want to show this as well. They incorporate the old Celtic writing as well, and that's why Mick Mann works so well for this. I was going to say, I'm going to go back to what I was saying about the plot, but I know I did split it this way. Blardinelli is given the chapters where there's a more fantastical element. So there's chapters later on where Slaine encounters a dragon farmer who breeds dragons. So when they're of age, the skulls are encrusted with diamonds, and they kill the dragons and harvest the diamonds. And the dragons in Slaine's world are like, they're called giant worms, and they look not a lot like what you see in like your typical fantasy books. They're very ugly, very grotesque, almost like a demon. And that's Belladinelli's wheelhouse, the weird, the strange. Like he shows how dragons see human beings. They can like see through the skin. So that's what they see when they look at humans. And Belladinelli's penmanship just is perfect for that. McMahon wouldn't be able to do that. Maybe no, but I don't know. He's much more of a different kind of stylization, and that's why this balances so well. And the dialogue is really, really good. Pat Mills, from the first chapter, has the perfect voice for Ukko. We see everything through Ukko's eyes, and obviously, I can see things now what I couldn't see when I was younger. And sometimes you think, is Ukko a reliable narrator? Because he's basically a scoundrel. Um, and so that adds to the fun of the story. But as I was saying, what happens is they basically encounter these druidesses, they try and rescue him. Oh, just got to show you that warp spasm. And he ends up in the employ of one of these high priest druids. And this is what I'm saying about where the fantasy is very muted, but when you do get a fantastical element, it's a real like wow moment. Just got to show this battle page. This is what I'm saying about McMahon being able to do really, really good fight sequences. Just look at the detail there. Absolutely amazing. And again here, I don't want to give away too much of the plot. I just want to give you my feelings of what I got from reading this again. And that's I mentioned this just a few seconds ago, but that's the alphabet, the Celtic alphabet. So they've got the lettering there. So if you want to learn how to write like a Celt, there you go. It's just little touches like that. This is stuff what you don't get in a lot of the comics, what you don't get in a lot of the fantasy comics. There's so much world building in the whole, literally world building from the dialogue, the dialect, to the cultures and the peoples and the religions, etc. So he works for this druid, ends up working for this druid, but he has encounters all through. Like he encounters this were beast, which is a brilliant like side quest. It's really, really fun. But when he works for this druid, they end up on this ship, and this is what I mean about the fantastical element. Oh, just got to show you this. I know I'm hopping all over, but the artwork is just jaw-droppingly beautiful. So they end up working for this. I'm sorry, but for this druid, and oh, seriously, you need to buy this book. So you know, I really do like this. It's going to be a very favourable review. Yeah, so they end up working for this druid who gets all the people under his employ onto this ship. So you think, okay, a ship's going to be like a giant ark kind of ship. Just, again, this page, wonderful. The light and shade by McMahon is just amazing. And he wouldn't have been an older guy at this time. This was early 80s. So he'd have only been in his late 20s, early 30s, if that, at the time. But this ship is powered by rune stones and sacrifice of animals. And so instead of sailing, it flies in the air. So that's how druid ships are powered. So that's, I mean, it's just these little touches which you know you're reading a fantasy story, and it doesn't oversaturate the story with the fantastical elements. It's very grounded, very earthy. The dialogue is suitably earthy as well, and it is basically a punk sort of sorcery tale. It's ragged, it's dirty, it's grimy, it's hilarious. There's so many funny chapters, and the fight sequences are just epic in scale. So it got to a point where he's served that druid. Something happens to the druid, so he moves on to his next quest, which is trying to steal a dragon, which is where Bellardinelli comes in. Like I said, Bellardinelli does amazing grotesquerie. Like you can see with this page, with this dragon climbing out of its cave. Well, the cave is actually a well what he dwells in. And so it ties it up nicely, but it leaves the story open to, it introduces some new characters who are the new big bad. So I can't wait to get the next volume, which will be the next adventure. The printing on this is really nice. The paper is a very, very heavy stock. It's matte, so I hate how a lot of American graphic novels do it. If they do black and white, where they have it shiny. Black and white needs to be on a matte paper, and this is matte. Some of the pages, because the art, some I think are scans, because they basically have to try and get them folded at different corners of where they've got in their own banks of original artwork and from other people, etc. So some of the scans are a bit weaker, especially on some of the early McMahon stuff, because it was very etchy then, but he tightened up, and so, but it doesn't distract from the, like I said, it's just a handful of pages, but the rest of it, as you can see, is just a beautiful, beautiful reproduction. And I actually enjoyed it more than, I've read this story a number of times, and I've enjoyed it more now, at my ripe old age, what I am now. No, I'm not going to tell you again. Than I did when I was a teenager, than I did when I was in my 20s, than I did when I was in my 30s. And the format is just beautiful. It's a really big, generous sized book. So compared to a comic, that's how big it is. It's a very generous size. It's not a bad price, $19.99. You get 200 and nearly 260 pages in it. Very, very high quality, very heavy, a rewarding read. Like I said, you see the story progresses as Slaine progresses, and you progress with the story. So you're completely involved in the story. The different artists, like I said, doesn't detract from the story. It doesn't pull you out because, like I said, I keep saying like I said, and I just need to stop. No, no more. That's banned. I want to say it. I can feel it. It doesn't distract you from reading the story because Blardinelli, like I said, Blardinelli deals with the fantastical elements, the grotesquerie. McMahon deals with the crowd scenes, the villages, the beautiful, beautiful scenery, and the fighting and the action, and it works perfectly. It's a beautiful case of synergy, and Pat Mills just wraps it together with his overarching story. Oh, it's just wonderful. Volume 2 is meant to be coming out in October, November, I think, this year. So that'll be interesting. I think that might have the Time Killer 1 storyline where he travels through time, and it might have the Glenn Fabry story, which is gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. So I can't wait to get that and do a review of it. So I would give this 10 out of 10. It was a joy. It better than I was expecting it to be. Because sometimes nostalgia can do funny things to your memory, and things what you thought were brilliant aren't necessarily all that good. But this was wonderful. It was a blast. I highly recommend buying it in this format. You can get it from 2000ad.com. You can get it from the Bezos site. You can get it from most reputable booksellers. Really, really good. A real good blast. If you're a fan of Conan, if you're a fan of Dungeons and Dragons, if you're a fan of just out and out fun, this is the book for you. So do yourself a favour, get one for you, get one for your friend, and spread the gospel of Slaine. Okay, bye.